Multilingual people of Reddit, what have you heard in a meeting that you weren't supposed to because the participants didn't know you speak their language?
I speak Japanese as a second language and worked at an izakaya in the Bay Area while I was in college. I also studied Mandarin and Korean. I have two stories. First, I was dating a Korean guy, and we went to an all-Japanese party in LA. There was a really handsome guy there, so in Korean, I whispered to my boyfriend that the guy was kinda cute. Then, surprise, the guy turned around, switched from speaking Japanese, and thanked me in Korean. Turns out he was half. His mom was from Busan. Fast forward 7 years. I'm working at the izakaya, and most of our customers are Japanese, Chinese, or Korean. Two Chinese guys were looking over the menu. Now, our chef was, let's say, particular. We couldn't guarantee how long anything would take to come out because he didn't follow the order tickets. He cooked whatever he felt like, whenever he felt like it. So these guys are asking me questions about timing and what the chef has available. But the truth is, we legit never knew until the dish was actually being made. I sheepishly apologized for not being able to give a clear answer. Then one of the guys got grumpy and muttered to his friend in Mandarin. She doesn't know anything. What do you want to drink? I blinked and replied in Mandarin. Yeah, what do you want to drink? He froze, totally embarrassed. They ordered a drink and then left shortly after. As they walked out, I could clearly hear him cursing under his breath from the shame.
I'm a white dude who speaks Mandarin and lived in China for a decade. I've heard it all. Not just in meetings, but on the street, in restaurants, on the subway, everywhere. I'm a dumb fat foreigner. I'm a white monkey. I couldn't have possibly completed that task because I'm just a dumb foreigner. I'd fuck that guy. Much appreciated. Go walk by him and grab his dick/pinch his ass. Not appreciated. He's tall. He's fat. What is he? Is he Russian? No, he's too fat. He must be American. Look at him pretending to read the menu/newspaper. Why's he in here, a Chinese language film? He's not gonna be able to understand anything. That's disgusting. All they come here for is to take our jobs and our women. Lol. I hate seeing foreigners with our/Chinese women. Oh wow, he can actually use chopsticks. Oh, he can eat spicy food. Wait, they actually like to eat that? Stinky tofu.
Wasn't really a meeting but close enough. I'm a white American. I mostly speak English but know a tiny bit of Spanish. I live in a majority Hispanic area, and while I'm not fluent, I do know some very basic Spanish, and have been in a few situations where I've had to use it before. Anyways, a while back I got a new job and I was basically the only white guy. I mostly got along with everyone, but there was one guy who really didn't like me much, not fully sure why. One day I was working on my machine, and I was pretty sure someone had changed some settings on it, seemingly intentionally. I won't go into detail, but not only was it an asshole thing to do, it could have wasted a lot of company money and potentially been dangerous for me to run the machine like that. I overheard the dude in Spanish talking to another guy, basically saying something like, "We can screw the güero, he'll probably never even know." I switched all my settings back right in front of him, turned around and told him in Spanish, "Vita la mierda, guy." His face turned bright red. He looked embarrassed as hell. It was a small win, felt good. That being said, I'm sure people still get one over on me plenty because of the language barrier. You win some, you lose some.
Not a meeting, but in grad school. I'm in the USA. I shared an office with a bunch of other grad students, many of whom were from other countries. One of them was Estonian, but had a German husband and frequently argued with him in German on the phone. I had minored in German and spent a summer there a couple years prior. I didn't speak amazing German, but understood it very well. Anyway, one day me and one of my other office mates were chatting about how the open office with 12 people wasn't great for working. I said, yeah, I don't need to hear Anna arguing again about whose family they're seeing for Christmas, like she has been all week. My office mate just stared at me and finally asked, wait, you understand German? That's when I realized Anna had been having those arguments in German, and I'd just been passively taking it in. After that, my office mates would ask me for info, which I shared, because Anna was really annoying. Hence me using her real name. Turns out no one appreciates hearing arguments with your husband on speakerphone in a shared space, regardless of the language.
I was a witness to this, in my high school physics class in the blue-collar town I grew up in. There was a group of ESL kids sitting in the back of class, speaking Korean. I found out later that they were talking a lot of shit about our teacher, who was about the whitest dude you could imagine. Picture a heavy-set 50-something who looked and dressed like he stepped out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Unfortunately for them, here's what they didn't know about our teacher. 1. He was stationed in Korea during the war. 2. His wife and children are Korean. So when this old white dude ripped them a new one in fluent Korean, they just sat in horrified silence. Then he spent the rest of the class telling us about his time in the service, how he met his wife, and even gave us a mini lecture on the origins of Asian slurs and what he'd do if he caught any of us using them. He was an awesome teacher. He had retired from nuclear consultation, was bored, and just wanted something to do. He didn't need the job or the money, and definitely didn't care about pissing off parents or school administrators, so we learned a lot from him.
I'm an American, but I lived in Germany on and off in my late teens and early 20s. As a result, I speak fairly fluent German, especially slang, or at least I did 15 years ago when this happened. I'd been at a media job for about 5 years. We had just hired a kid fresh out of college. For some reason, he was in the break room, loudly talking in German on his phone, rocking a terrible American accent. He was talking trash about coworkers as they walked by, assuming none of us spoke German. Stuff like, that guy looks gay, that woman looks like a lesbian, that guy looks weird. Really immature stuff. He probably had been an exchange student at some point and gotten away with it for years. Then he called me a schlamp, slut, to his friend. That was it. I walked up, extended my hand and said, "Hi. Can I introduce myself? My name is," insert very German-sounding name here. "I see you're new, yes? Welcome. Some of us speak German here. I'm sorry you find my clothing slutty, but it's very hot out today, and I wanted to be comfortable on my walk home. Let me know if I can help you with anything. Good day now." His jaw hit the floor. He didn't show up for day 2. Total no call, no show. No one ever saw him again.
Not a meeting, but in Japan before I moved to the US. I used to be an English teacher. The rule was I had to pretend I didn't speak Japanese at all. I'm half, so it was moderately convincing, lol. The idea was, if the kids believed I couldn't speak Japanese, they'd feel pressured to speak English with me. The problem is, kids love butt jokes. And butt jokes are my weakness. First day of my new class, I give myself intro in English. The kids are fully convinced and amazed. Next, they introduce themselves one by one. One boy cuts into his friend's intro and says, very seriously, no, he lies. His name is not a friend's name. He is Unchai Ketsu-san. Mr. Shitty Butt. I immediately burst out laughing. I couldn't help it. The boy was confused, then horrified when he realized I had understood. He kept shouting it was just a joke, and all the other kids were screeching with joy. I tried to stay serious and tell them to stop laughing, but I couldn't stop laughing either. It was chaos. Took forever to get back to the lesson.
This hasn't happened to me much in Japan because most people are too polite to say stuff in public. But a funny story from my Filipino friend. A pair of Japanese women, mother and daughter, switched to English to talk shit about her tattoos. I think they were mortified and got off the train at the next stop. The other day, I was staying at a hotel in Shinjuku. There was an Indian guy in the public lounge talking to an American tourist. He was loudly complaining about the company he worked for, clearly exploiting him, but it quickly turned into him ranting about his culture shocks and Japanese culture in general. I didn't quite have the heart to go over and tell him he probably shouldn't be complaining so loudly in public. He clearly assumed the Japanese people around him couldn't understand, but a lot of adults have a basic understanding of English and will definitely catch that, even if they don't respond. I don't know if it's really politeness, but that's a discussion for another time. It might just be face-saving or a general unwillingness to cause conflict. Anyway, I don't live here anymore, just visiting, so there's less opportunity for stuff like that to happen. Also, I used to be an English teacher. That was my job when I lived in Japan. My students didn't really say bad things about me, but the kids could be cheeky sometimes. Actually, I remember it was in the UK. I was teaching French and Spanish teenagers, and I caught them teaching each other swear words.
I was in line at a popular store. The queue was long and moved slowly. The woman behind me kept telling her boyfriend, not in the local language, but it happened to be my native tongue, that she really needed to take a piss, and she used the most vulgar word. At one point she said she'd start pissing on everyone's heads in the shop because the queue was so slow. She said a bunch of other weird, rude things. I just smiled to myself and stayed quiet. Further down the queue, I grabbed a juice from a shelf as we passed through that section. The queues go through the aisles, and I picked that one because of the sodas and sweets. It was the last thing on my list. I literally just stretched my hand and grabbed the one I wanted. Super quick. So the woman says to her boyfriend, "I fucking hate people who start grabbing stuff while they are in the queue. This shouldn't be fucking allowed." Like, what a random, mean, silly thing to say. I only had like 4 other small items in my hands. So I turned around, looked her straight in the eyes, and asked, "Why? What's your problem? How exactly does this affect you?" Well, both of them, even though he didn't speak much, just completely deflated. Said nothing. She looked like a deer in the headlights, started chewing on her lips, and stared at the floor. It was so satisfying. I even grabbed a few extra things I didn't need, just out of spite.
I was waiting at a tram stop in Amsterdam when I overheard a small family group of, I would say Venezuelan or Colombian, tourists, parents with 2 teenagers, talking very loudly in Spanish about some rather embarrassing gossip involving family and friends. This was around 10 years ago, so I don't remember exactly what they were saying, but it was definitely the kind of stuff you wouldn't say out loud in your own country. Not explicit sexual details, but close, mostly gossip about someone's love life. Now, I'm not from Amsterdam, but I lived elsewhere in the Netherlands and my girlfriend at the time lived in the city, so I knew the trams and how to get around. And here's the thing, besides the juicy gossip, they were also talking about their travel plans, and they were about to get on the wrong tram. So I had this awkward decision to make. Either embarrass them by letting them know I had heard everything they were saying, or say nothing and let them take the wrong tram, which would waste time and probably cause some confusion. In the end, I decided I'd rather be corrected than misdirected. So I waited for a pause in the conversation and approached them. I explained in Spanish, it's my native language too, that they were about to make a mistake and should take the tram going the opposite way. They were a little surprised, laughed a bit out of embarrassment, and thanked me a lot. They crossed the street to get to the correct tram stop and continued their conversation much more quietly.
I'm fluent in French, originally from Canada, started speaking it when I was 5. I live in Scotland now, so I don't get many chances to use it. I work in student accommodation. A few years ago, I was at the front desk when a student came down to play ping pong. She was intense. She was French and spent the whole time swearing at her opponent using the most vulgar insults. I was laughing because I could understand everything and assumed they must be close friends and that her partner understood French. They finished the game, and, nope. They had been speaking to each other in English and had clearly only just met. She came back down a few times over the next few weeks and kept swearing like that, much to my amusement. One day, as she was finishing up and walking past me, I said something like, "You're really passionate about your game, huh? I hope your game partner doesn't mind you insulting her mother so often." I said it in French. Got the full-on shocked Pikachu face and a "Oh non tu parle français?" Then she realized I found the whole thing funny. After that, she'd drop by the desk now and then to chat. It was actually pretty nice.
I can't really remember a situation like that. More like the opposite. It seems I look like I could be Italian, Polish, Russian, Turkish, Greek, Pakistani, Afghan. You get the idea. Even people from those cultures often mistake me for something I'm not, and the guesses change with the seasons as my tan fades. My name, though, is very Western. I've even been accused of lying about my identity because I didn't match my name. LOL. I've also seen a lot of racists completely change their behavior when they realized I wasn't one of them. And I've been in many awkward situations where I wasn't sure if people were talking to me or not, because I had no idea what language they were speaking. Trying to be polite, I guessed. Which led me to say things like, "It's a bottle of water. With lemon. I bought it this morning. It's not an alcoholic drink or anything. Yeah. It's good water. Yeah. I like lemon in my water." All that while having no idea what they were actually saying. Just that they were pointing at my water bottle and trying to communicate.
Was in my country together with a girl from abroad. We were both speaking English. A couple of girls were sitting in the other side of the room. I happened to look in their direction and one of them looked at me and told the other, "What the fuck is that fucking foreigner looking at? I'll get up and smack him on the face." Apparently they were a couple and one of the girls liked to play the part of the over-aggressive idiot. Anyway, I translated the conversation to my girlfriend and then decided to mess with them. I switched mid-sentence from English to Italian by quoting a very difficult tongue twister that a lot of Italians have trouble to understand. I glanced quickly in her direction and her face was priceless.
I was working as a site safety manager on a construction site. It was an insurance-funded remediation job with a very strict deadline. The prime contractor hired anyone who was good at their job. It was a big city, by Canadian standards. On site, I had Arabic-speaking painters from about 5 or 6 different nationalities, Polish electricians, Quebecois glaziers, who flat-out refused to acknowledge English, and a French from France flooring crew. That was fun. We had daily mutual complaints, LOL. I lost count of how many Spanish-speaking nationalities were there. They used to mess with me by breaking down into regional and ethnic differences within countries. I think I wore out Google Translate. The workers would often start talking to me in their native languages and pretend they didn't speak English, like this one Polish guy I knew spoke English because I'd overheard him speaking to his retirement investment advisor, in English, with better grammar than I use. So I started learning a few phrases in each language, especially words related to their trades. Then during my site inspection walkarounds, I'd suddenly ask them what they were doing, in their own language, let them respond, then say something like, "Stop bullshitting me," or the local equivalent, and tell them to get back to work. Even though I had no idea what they just said to me, LOL. Honestly, it broke the ice. It made our interactions more friendly and fun, which, as a contracted safety consultant, was a huge win. Then I started teaching them ridiculously rude English phrases to use on the prime contractors' supervisors and managers. One morning, during a management meeting, 4 of the biggest, most intimidating guys, covered in tattoos, were trying to figure out who taught the new 18-year-old kid on the Iraqi painting crew to call them cross-eyed cockjawed cum dumpsters. The kid barely spoke English, and none of the rest of his crew spoke any either. I loved that job. LOL.
I might be off about this, and I'm sure someone will tell me if I am. I'm American and I work with a lot of people from the UK, France, Switzerland, and Germany. I don't have an accent, and most of my colleagues say that my way of speaking is easier to understand than, say, a strong southern or northeastern US accent. I understand quite a bit of German and was once called an American dog by a wealthy German. I replied with vielen Dank. Once, I was assigned to a job with a French person and a German person. They could only communicate with each other in English. The Swiss confused me a bit. I thought they all learned High German in school, but many Germans say they can't understand them at all. A lot of it seems regional. I often work with 2 guys from a small mountain village, and even the Germans won't try to understand what they're saying. Most of my European colleagues can't understand a heavy British accent. One funny memory. 5 or 6 Brits were joking around with each other, saying stuff like, "I'll open you like a lemon." They were speaking loudly, posturing, not smiling, very dry humor. A Swiss woman pulled me aside, genuinely worried, and asked if they were about to fight. I had to reassure her, "Nope, they're just playing around."